Thank you for tuning in to the World Builder. I can't believe you just got me. I knew you were doing it too.
That was like a slow train coming.
But I'm like, he's not gonna get me. It's been years since we've done that to each other.
It's like the most stupid basic one too. You know, it was like just a slow train, like anyone could step out of, but you just can't because it's like so slow.
So I've got you here. And I've got the notes just off to the right. So I'm trying to just focus on the notes, but I could see you down here. And I'm just like, I'm not going to look. I know. I'm like, you know what? Even if I look, it's been like years since. Okay. Clearly, I am in the mood to laugh.
That's the way to live life.
Oh. Because now I'm thinking of all this shit that's making me laugh. Mm-hmm. Thank you for tuning in to the World Builder's Anvil, Season 3 episode.
I was being as good as I could be that time.
You just turn around. I'm going to just do this and cover up your face for a minute. I can't do it. Thank you for tuning in to the World Builder's Anvil, Season 3, Episode 8. Lizzy, the Leader. Creating a Lizard Antagonist.
Don't know where to start building your fantasy world?
Do you need more? Does it make sense?
Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination.
This is the place where we will prime your mind.
Now, it's time to heat up the forge,
break out the mithril ingots and hammer.
Welcome to the World Builder's Anvil. I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I'm Michael Miller.
Let's sup from the muck of Java and build.
Welcome back, as always, innocently partaking in the beginning of this episode. My name is Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And eating frogs throughout the episode, crunchy frogs.
Anthrax triple.
I am Michael Miller. now that we've finally gotten underway.
Just for the people who are going to hear this, and hopefully he'll edit it, or it'll be over 40 hours long so far.
Yeah, and I might leave some of it in. Jeff and I had a funny moment. So we haven't done this in a long time, and it's so juvenile, but it still cracks us both up. What we did early on when we started doing... Actually, we used to do it in person too, didn't we? Now that I think about it. When we recorded very early on in person, we would try to... Whoever's intro it was, if it was my intro, then Jeff would mess with me. And if it was Jeff's intro, I would mess with him. And it would usually just be very... crude visual jokes, but in silence to get the other person to screw up their audio. And we haven't done this to each other in a while. I don't know why we kind of got away from it, because we did it consistently for a very long time there. And
I think it was just becoming so ineffective that it was a waste of our time.
or maybe it's just our Saturdays are so busy that we're accustomed to trying to knock it out. Yeah. So I'm doing my intro just now, and Jeff started to do it. He barely did anything at all. Like,
and it was the lamest, most simplest attempt.
Simple little attempt. Barely anything at all. But for some reason, it tickled me, and I just busted a gut laughing. And it's been about 10 minutes of us, trying to get this underway, mostly because I'm just chuckling to myself.
Well, that's always the ultimate curse. Once you start chuckling, and that's the proverbial you is you become the thing that feeds the fire,
right? And that's what was happening, because I was thinking,
and that's what always happens in these scenarios, and it's almost never funny what happens to cause it. It's like stupid humor, but stupid humor works. It just shows stupid humor still is the best.
Well, not only that, but when you're just in a good mood to laugh, and
it always makes it better.
Life is great. I want you guys all to, if things are hard right now and you're dealing with a lot of difficulties, I still want you to take on the perspective that life is great, and really, really take that on, because the more you bring that perspective to your world, the easier it is for your life to be great.
And there's some truth, and I learned this in my pain university class taught to me by the VA, that mental mindset plays a lot for physical pain, for mental anguish. So if you take it into account that you are anguished, you are closer to having an issue than you would be if you take the thing that everything's great, even when life sucks. It's best to put on your best face forward whenever possible, because it's like you're like this level of pain that you can tolerate, and the problem is the closer you get to it, the less it takes to set it off. So keep that in mind.
The reason
pain university to you.
So for me, I'm sitting here and like life is great, and Jeff's making this face, and I start laughing. And I'm thinking about last night. I was making my wife laugh so hard, and we both had the giggles.
You get the visuals back of that.
Yeah. So that's coming back to my mind, and I'm just sitting here laughing and laughing and laughing, and I can't get through this stupid intro. So I hope everybody's listening in as good a mood as I am. Today we are talking about creating the antagonist to our protagonist. So we'll I think it was last episode or the episode before. Was it last episode?
Last episode. We developed Frog Legs, I think was his official name.
Yes, that's officially what they call. No, I don't know. I don't think we gave him a name yet, which I was a little disappointed that we didn't. And I would like to give this character a name today if possible. Or do you need to develop a language first?
I need a language first.
Okay, fair enough. So then maybe his name is Frog Legs. But
that's maybe what Lizzie would call him. But and now here's the trick. Lizzie, which is the working title for this character, which is really hopefully not what we stick with, but it's in my brain. That's a problem. Lizzie,
you're not very creative with this Lizzie name.
No.
Aren't you a writer?
But you don't need to be when you know it's a working title. You just need something.
I know. I'm just cracking myself up here. Can we? Well, could we go at least with Leonard the lizard?
Sure. We can go Leonard the lizard, and that could be his name, but then it won't sound like that whenever the language is created.
Sure.
But here's the thing: he is built as the antagonist to the story, but the plot twist is he's not the antagonist.
He's like the enforcer of the antagonist.
Oh, hold on a second.
I mean, are you okay with that wording? Because that's how I see him.
Yes. So since we're starting off with who they are, an enforcer is maybe not a bad way to look at it. I mean, he is the leader of the Vanguard, the invasion force into the island. And I'm not 100% sure if he's supposed to be the overall general of the entire operation, or if he's just the leader of the Vanguard, the initial landing force that's going to secure the position for the greater force to come into, which might make more sense with the way we're talking about the story going. What's your thoughts on that?
It's a different direction than I was thinking, but I kind of like where you're coming from. My thought was that this guy was going to be like kind of a big field general, and the way you're describing him, my concept in my head is shifting that he might just be like, he could be like an advanced shock troop for all we know.
Well, one thing is he's in charge of like the shock troops, so it feels like and in comparison to the military defensive, it's going to be an overwhelming force he has. And then all of a sudden the main army shows up with the actual like, oh my goodness. It gives you that oh my goodness moment where you're fighting the AT-AT and you almost you think you might be able to, you're not sure, it's kind of close, and then all of a sudden the speeder goes over the hill and you see 100 more.
Well, I'm going somewhere else in my head with it. My basic gist is that I'm looking at the character previously as and this could still be true, but as a character that is, bringing difficulty to the antagonist's island, and subsequently an adversarial relationship develops. But
you keep saying it. Antagonist and protagonist backwards.
Oh, I am. I'm sorry. I apologize. I'll go with good guy and bad guy. So I stop messing things up. Like he's the bad guy and he's bringing the badness to the good guy's island. And for me, in the back of my head, I was thinking about it as, okay, he's a general, he's a leader, he's a bad guy. So it just makes sense that the good guy is like, that guy's someone we're going to have difficulties with. We got to work on that guy.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if he is lower on the totem pole and thus runs into our good guy just because he's boots on the ground, I feel like that relationship has the potential to be a lot more intimate.
Yeah, yes.
And
yes.
I like that a lot more. I like that idea,
yes.
I like that a lot more. So I might request that he even be lower in rank, maybe just like some sort of a lieutenant sort of thing.
When I think of him as a general, it's more in the traditional sort of barbarian army sense of general, where he is the warrior leader. You know, if there's a charge, he's at the front of it. So he is very heavily involved in the action, and typically at the thickest part of the action, because he is he has strategic abilities, but you know, it's his prowess as a warrior in general which gets the followers, not the sort of modern day sense of he's a tactician. You know, he understands, you know, the complexities of layered combat. Meduse. That's an official military term. Yeah.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. All right. So what else do we want to do? You want to read through the basic questions that?
Yes.
Okay. So we've got a bunch of questions here that you guys, if you haven't, you should know this pattern by now. But if you don't have it memorized, and I don't, so I won't fault you for it. This is the things you can ask when you're creating, you know, significant characters, even smaller characters in your world.
Yes. Yes, they're good to know. And I'll do them for groups too. You know, it's like, it's just, it's good to know.
And to be clear, when he says groups, he will like create a society of characters, but that society has its own personality, right? So you can create societies on a planet as though they were a singular person. And then overall, that society has that personality, so that when you're, you know, doing your grand sweeping plans, it's easier to manage than trying to remember all the idiosyncrasies and complexities of an entire culture.
Well, and people always think, and this is always a mistake people make with cultures, is that because even if there's a strong individual, that they have, you know, total control of a society or anything. And the problem is society is a train going its own course, and it will shift. And there are things that make it turn and change. Don't get me wrong. But in general, it's going in its direction, and it's trying to get somewhere that's probably not quite where it's headed anyway. That's you know, that's what keeps societies struggling and moving forward, is trying to get somewhere, but never quite being on track. So that's just the way of the world. But the first question here is, who are they? And in this sense, who is this person? Who is he or she? And I have it called a warrior leader, a sort of a veteran warrior.
And this is a basic question. Like, we're not asking who this person is on like what's the word I'm looking for? Like their id, their internal. Like, we're not asking like you to get real deep here. Just the basics of like what is their job and who they are.
Just as a quick refresher for people, whenever I develop a character, the first wave through, I like to go over what I call the basic meta and the extended meta questions of the character, you know, as essentially basics of who they are. And sometimes I might not know much more than what I come up with here in this scenario, but I'm almost always the kind of person I'm actually adding to it as I'm adding to it as I'm so my brain starts to create stories as I go, I guess is the way I say it. So, which sometimes is good, and sometimes it gets in the way if you don't want it to be what keeps coming up. But sometimes it's telling you something as well.
What do you mean, like when the character?
So like I have a preliminary vision, and it's like a outcome I want, but all of the things and ideas and stories that come in my head as I'm developing the character go in a different direction than what I anticipate.
What you originally intend. Yeah. See, I do that with stories. Like a whole story, I'll be like, this is what I want to happen. And then you got characters in there, and the character's like, I'm not going to do that. And I kind of like that. Like, sometimes it's irritating if you have a cool idea, but other times it's like, it's going to go this way instead of that way. And
it's always a revision of, do you want to step backwards, or is the change better? And you look at in the broader scope of it, not in just that moment. Because yes, Luke, I'm your father is an awesome moment in that moment of that story, but not necessarily in any moment of any story. At the beginning of Star Wars, to have like Obi-Wan, like, yeah, I'm your daddy. It's a completely different context. But probably true. I think they didn't really cover that, but I believe he was actually the father.
What now?
No, I'm just ignore me. I'm just lying now.
Fair enough. Okay.
Okay. Now, these are all just basic meta questions.
Okay. So who is he?
Who is he? And my initial thing is he's a warrior leader, sort of like your traditional, like sort of like German or Celtic or Gallic barbarian chieftain.
Is it a he?
It doesn't have to be. No, I'm just saying he because I don't know yet. It could be a her, a he. Or,
okay. Sure. I don't know why I keep going back to it, but because of we've discussed this the whole way through with this world, that there are frogs that change gender, and gender being such a big subject. And I don't want to belabor the point, but it just seems like a good opportunity to explore some concepts, which I think good fiction should do. So I keep bringing it up not to belabor it. I keep bringing it up because it's on my mind.
Well, and the interesting thing is because you're having that with the protagonist's race, there's two things you can do here. Is you can play more with it here. And it's an important topic that we've decided that we want to involve is, the question of gender here. But the other question is do you want something to that people anchor upon, to sit there and go, okay, this is a normal, big, strong man society invading, this gender bending society, literally, as an anchor too, and it actually kind of works either way. So I'm indifferent. We could go. This could be a woman-dominated race or something too.
Well, that's one of my thoughts. Is there's plenty of examples in nature where a species female is
where this female are the weaponized instead of the males. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, we could definitely go that route. I don't care. It would be interesting to do too. So if that interests you, we could go there, and I'm fine with that. We start calling Leonard a she.
I do like the name Leonard, though.
We would go after Lizzie then.
I don't like Lizzie. Maybe
Lizzie has an axe.
Lizzie, funny. You're on point this morning.
Fire. That's right.
All right, moving on. It's getting away from the Lizzie Borden references. Yeah. So
we're going to call
Lizzie
Leonard
is a chief. So Lizzie is a chieftain warrior.
Yep.
And we're not trying to define the society yet, guys. This is we're just using terminology for the sake of getting.
Well, remember later on though, when we develop the societies now, since we're developing the characters first, unlike my normal progression, which is down towards the details, we're going to have to sit here and go, all right, let's take Lizzie. Is Lizzie a good example of a character of this race? Right. Maybe she's an outlier where she's just so good. She is a warrior leader, or maybe it's a woman dominated society. We're not defining that here. We're saying she is a warrior leader. But it will potentially influence the way we go. Now, what do they do? Well, it's kind of in who they are in this scenario, but she's the leader of the advanced force. And for those of you who haven't heard every episode that we've ever created, or even on this topic, essentially this lizard race is invading this island for food. Essentially, they typically exploit the areas they go to. And so within that, the island that they last is starting to dry up, and their boat navigation is not good enough to go backwards. So they just keep following the current. And this is the next island chain in the current. I think there's a door song that should have been made about that, but there's not. Actually, the Riders of the Storm is probably better, but originally it was a wave rider on the wave, I think was the.
Yes, that's exactly what it was.
The leader of Vanguard. But I like the idea too, where it's like you're sitting there and and the initial impression is that there's this overwhelming force that's landed on the island and is just kicking butt. The hero is going to help organize enough to where, well, it's going to be hard, but maybe we have a chance. And then you see the main fleet pull into the harbor. And go, oh.
You're reminding me of the Battle of Serenity Valley.
Battle of Serenity Valley. Could you remind me of this battle, please?
I believe you're being sarcastic. I refuse to.
No, it's not. I probably do, but the only thing of Serenity I can think of is the Firefly spaceship right now. So
yeah, okay. So what do you think
that's
that was
the
named
lore?
after?
That's probably the lore of the battle where they lost the war. I'm assuming. I don't remember the specifics of the battle.
It's the very first thing in the very first episode.
Oh, that was the Battle of Serenity.
That was the battle.
Whatever. Okay.
Jeff, you are all right. You're no longer on point.
I've lost my point.
You've lost your point.
I lost my point. Okay.
Yeah. So in the beginning, that is a fight that they are struggling to keep themselves in, and they're waiting for reinforcements. And they're like, when the reinforcements come, which we just need to hold out a little bit longer, we're going to crush these guys. And then the resistance says, yeah, there's too much going on. It's too hot. We're not coming. Yeah, and then they get slaughtered at the Battle of Serenity Valley because all the
because they're left behind.
Exactly.
Yep. And this is kind of a similar idea.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, we've pulled it together. The resistance is showing up to help us maybe have a chance in this battle. And they have reinforcements too.
There's a lot of them.
There's a lot more of them.
Now, do we have, not that we need to decide this right now, but do we, or you have a plan as to explain why they don't immediately get overrun?
Yes.
You do have a plan for that. Okay, good.
It's the nature of the frogs. They're going to keep themselves at bay, so to say. It's like, it's going to be typical asynchronous warfare. So essentially, the initial engagements will be traditional warrior battles, but the hero is going to lead them on the classic example of how you deal with a superior force, which is you use asynchronous warfare, aka guerrilla warfare.
Mm.
And that's going to be the big thing he introduces early on, and which will allow them to start breaking up the supplies, start causing issues with the enemy, making it possible for them to hold on to gains and forcing them to keep moving around and changing their plans. And they can move quickly enough to where they don't get re-engaged. Ask the Maccabees how this work out.
I feel that militarily makes perfect sense, but story-wise doesn't, because I know we are committed to the good guy being all about farming and peace as a means to stopping this war. So I think that the guerrilla warfare aspect has to come from a lieutenant on the good guy's side.
Oh, no, I think it's him, but it's an act of desperation, right? It's like, we can't be overwhelmed, but it's a reluctant hero moment too, where it's like,
okay, all right, I could live with that.
But you create an inner division that way. So,
right. We're not talking about that today. I keep getting us off subject, and I apologize.
Yes, that's what Michael does. Okay,
kind of my thing.
Okay, so what do they do? He's the leader of the Vanguard. Where are they at the beginning of the story? He's on a ship. Getting ready to land. That's a simple one here. He's literally in the middle of the ocean, and the beginning of his story is he probably sees some birds circling, going, "Okay, we're going towards those birds."
Yeah, land is that way.
Land ho is the moment in pirate movies, I believe.
Not necessarily just pirate though, just seafaring.
Seafaring is true. Any kind of seafaring, like old seafaring stuff. New seafaring stuff is like, the GPS on this ship isn't working.
Who needs to know navigation? I have a satellite.
That's right. Where's the current? I don't know. My Google Boats is telling me to take a left at the next current.
Google Boats. Google Boats.
That's right.
All right. So what's our next question?
Now, when do they do it? So
now is this a timeline question?
Yes, this is a timeline question. So essentially all these questions are kind of, where's the character at the beginning of the story? This isn't even necessarily where he's going, but this is so you understand who this character is coming in. And sometimes if there's an important thing like that, we could in theory make this when they do it is when he changes. But the thing is, I don't think this character changes. This character just, realizes what's happening, and, they are a good leader, a good warrior leader, because he understands basic tactics, and he's realizing that this constant churn and moving is not working out very well. This is maybe the second landing he's been involved in or something. Like maybe he was a young warrior, or was a young warrior when they invaded the last island. And now he's the wizened leader warrior going, we're just doing this again. But we have to do this because we're going to starve to death if we don't, but this isn't working. So he's pre-set up with the idea of, or she is pre-set up with the idea of, this is stupid, but we had our only choice is what's in front of us, which is this island. And obviously we have to eat. Yummy frog legs.
And frogs are tasty.
Frogs are tasty. So when do they do it?
So on the frogs are tasty, I have a concept for this specific character. I would like this character to survive a poisoning.
Okay.
So most of their warriors are going to straight die if they try to eat.
Yeah. Well, I think that's going to be one of the initial things to help slow them down too, right? Like, yes, big victory, eat up.
Yeah. Well, but especially if they try to eat the young, of course, because they're way more poisonous than the adults.
And typically predators seek the young because they're easier targets.
Of course. And it also helps to eliminate the enemy if you can.
Yes, it plays a dual victory here in the eating of sentience. So breaks the idea of what the world was like. So that's when they show up here. So in the context of the story of the antagonist is this character arrives. His characters, they arrive at the moment that you want to shatter. You've developed the way society is, the way the normal life is. This person literally shows up at that moment and goes, today's a new day. I keep envisioning it. It's not quite the same, but it's the priest who notices the Viking longship breaking through the mist, coming towards that first monastery in England going, what's that boat?
Maybe they're our friends.
Hey, you're the guy from that TV show on History Channel, right?
Is that Rick Steves?
Breaks the idea of what the world was like, but essentially that is the entire point, of, a first act typically in a longer story. And it could just be a portion of that if it's all like one novel. But essentially the idea is you always develop what's life like and what changes that forces the story to happen. The story is because there's a moment, a twisting in time. And so that's the moment which Lizzie shows up. And for me, it's a shock moment. It's like literally the ships break out of the mist and they come landing and they come hard. How do they get it done?
Now, is this a question about specifically how they got this done, or how typically they would get things done?
It's however you want to look at the question. That's the beautiful thing. It's meant to be open-ended. So it's
fair enough.
It's kind of, but in general, it's how do they get things done?
I mean, I would say with overwhelming numbers and tactical superiority.
Yeah. Numbers, physical, plus physical prowess, because that's what other things do.
And I also seem to remember, didn't we say that they were poisonous as well, and that's why they normally bite in combat? Yeah, that's true.
Like they were venomous. So
they're venomous. So it's just that like they're venomous.
Too confused. I think poison is because there's one you use to make your food ready to eat, and there's the other one that uses
one of them is basically like, oh, poison, you're going to get sick, and now it makes it like really hard for their enemies to fight back. And the frogs are like toxic.
The frogs are toxic. Yeah, that's right. So one's like, we want to get you sick, it really it's step one in food preparation. That's their traditional eating method. Is instead of cooking, they prepare you by biting. And
it's like one of these immediate effects. So like they're in the midst of combat, if they can get in close to hand and bite who they're fighting, they don't win
instantly, but it's a short fight.
Right. It's a real short fight after that. So what became hard for them fighting the frogs is because they'd bite the frogs and the frogs were like, I mean, yes, it's still a physical wound, but it's not affecting the frogs at all, other than it being a physical wound.
And the reason they're doing it is because of burnt ground, I'll call it.
Burnt
essentially
ground. Salted earth,
but it was the I'm thinking more of like the Russian tactics against invasions against the French and the Germans, where they would they'd burn their ground as Russia was invaded, and so as the enemy armies advanced, there was no food. And now here's the interesting thing: the frogs are essentially burnt ground in the fact that they're hard to eat because they're poison. But the irony is, because of their treatment of where they live or lived, the lizards have burnt the ground behind them. So they can't run back to Berlin or to Paris to hide. Yeah,
because it's all gone.
They burnt Paris and took off on ships. So, the Grand Army has no choice but to succeed. So burnt ground both ways, i.e. desperation. Which is kind of the thing I like about this story as it's building to. It's a story of desperation, which I think war stories, desperation and war should go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. But it's kind of cool where even the superior force is desperate here. Everyone is desperate. So yeah. And the frogs do some intrinsic advantages. They own the island, they know the terrain. But they have a physically superior force in both size and actual just prowess. Hand to hand, these lizards are chucking frogs around like they better have the sticky legs to stick to trees when they get thrown, because they're going to get thrown into trees. So the lizards just have them, extended meta. Now, extended meta, this is sort of a thing I like to, not for all world building ideas, but specifically for character building, because it's kind of hard to have no detail on your characters. You need a little bit, and this is just for you to keep in mind later on when you come back to add the detail to them. We'll probably take a pause at this season when we want to go in deeper. And then the next season we'll actually develop the cultures, and then we'll come back and build the characters deeper, which is just something I just thought of now, but it makes sense to me because it'll give us a lot of framework to work off of for the two races, or the two ethnicities, however you want to call it, going forward. So you can kind of play off of each other. And that's really what world building is. It's what if questions that play off of each other. You can ask yourself all kinds of what if questions. And that's the problem you get lists typically is, you run through a series of questions which might or might not be relevant to you, to your story or whatever. But the interesting thing is it's when you have the questions that address each other is when it becomes interesting. So at least to me. So now the type of character. Okay, so this is
as you say, what do you mean by
dynamic or static? So I think this is a dynamic character, but I could be wrong. This doesn't have to be.
I thought you were saying that this character probably wasn't going to change. Wouldn't that make them more static?
Well, their primary motivation and thought process it will remain the same. That does not mean the character is static, but because of that, the character could easily be static. And they might even be complex. That goes to the next question. But, the question is this character going to be a complex character or a simple character? And
I think I see this character more simple.
Yeah, I kind of agree. And they're not, but I would say the next one, the Judy Blume question, are they round or flat? I think it's a round character. I think it's a seasoned elder. There's a reason why they're on this path. And to anyone intelligent, they should have seen whatever this character does as obvious. And I'm assuming the ultimate antagonist will. Who's the character? So I want to say it's a round static character.
Expect me to need you to redefine that in the future.
Yeah, of course.
Fair enough.
And who's the character connected to the big baddie? The big bad lizard, Big Bad Lizzy. And how are they connected? Feudal or oathbound. Oathbound. And here's the thing I like about the oathbound idea is what the oathbound idea is, and this is, especially for a fantasy setting, how powerful is an oath? How easy is it to break an oath? Because in the real world, it's unfortunately simple. If I make an oath to not invade your country, and then 30 seconds later I invade your country, that's happened throughout history several times.
Usually by England and America.
Well, that's not looking very deeply at history, but looking at those two, yes. Now, the other irony is here is how are they connected? It could be deeper. It could be, family connections, but here it's the oath relationship of a lizard, and in a warrior society, typically, reputations themselves are a powerful thing.
Well, and so are oaths.
And so are oaths.
Especially if it's a blood oath, like stuff like that.
It was like an interesting thing I learned, and I believe it's to be true, like especially in early feudal societies, your oath was to your liege lord. And that was an important fact if conflicts broke out. So if your liege lord rebelled against the king and the king was defeated, it typically would not be held against the people who owed oaths to that leader. So like if this baron rebels against the king, it's not typically held against his people. Because they were upholding their oath to their leader. He did break his oath to his, and there might have been a valid reason or not. Who cares? That's all settled with who wins.
Yeah.
Typically, but typically like other lords. The king might be mad, but the other lords typically won't hold it against someone for following their oath. It's typically a sign of respect, even if they don't agree with the side you're on. But the fact that you stood by your oath is powerful. It's like in My World High Wall, literally what I would call a knight in the story just means he's blood sworn. Almost like a blood brother in our world where he's, put his blood as an oath to protect someone, so that's kind of how I use blood brothers in that scenario, but it's a very serious oath, and, for you, if one of those people, like if their leader was to be killed while they were on guard duty and they didn't die, it would be massively bad for them. Like they would be unemployable because they failed at their oath at the highest level there, so that's just the way it rolls.
Can't let that happen.
Got to watch those oaths. So I like the idea of oaths. I think they're interesting historically, and I've not decided yet how powerful that oath is here. I'm thinking it's going to be more powerful than Lizzy the leader wants it to be.
I like oaths because, especially in a story, because it is a breeding ground for conflict, right? And nothing pops up faster as an opposition to something until you make a commitment to something. So if you make a commitment to, I'm not going to have any donuts for the next 2 months, I guarantee you're going to have an opportunity for free donuts that like almost immediately you're going to get like a coupon, or you're going to go to work and someone will have purchased like free donuts for everyone in the office. Like that's exactly how it works. I don't know why. It's the universe. It's ridiculous, but it's true. It happens all the time. And maybe it's always happening all the time. And the only reason that you start to notice it is because you've made an oath, because you've made a commitment against it. And then you're like, oh, these donuts would have been here anyway.
Yeah.
Now that I've made a promise to myself not to eat them, it becomes a challenge and it becomes confronting. It's in my face now. So like in a fictional story where you have someone, they make a blood oath to a leader, or they make a commitment to, whatever. The first thing that's going to pop up is something that says, yeah, I'm going against that, whether it is a plot line, a physical difficulty, or another character who's got an opposing, perspective. And it's just great. Like it's promises, oaths, commitments. These are all great breeding ground for conflict in books. So I'm a big fan of it for your characters, and have it be part of plot lines. Like, oh, this character wants to achieve this thing, but achieving that thing means making a commitment to this oath or that leader. It's like, now that's going to get you into trouble.
What Michael's saying is he's a big believer in oath breakers.
Oh yeah. I mean, in a story. Well, but no, and they don't have to be an oath breaker for it to be interesting, right? Like, some of them,
it's the battle against it,
it's like a peer pressure thing. Like it's interesting if a character is like, well, I've made an oath to X thing, and then there's all this opposition, and everyone else who made the oath is okay with breaking the oath, and they're like, well, no, we took an oath. That's what makes that character exceptional, and usually what makes that character the focus of the story, the movie, the book, whatever it is
because of them.
It's because they're not willing.
It's either they're steadfast or they're the rebel.
Well, just the fact that they're not willing to fold when everyone else does. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a billion movies that are examples of this.
Okay. And so now, as we bring it in for the world building task, have all of your other fantasy races eaten by one of your races. Have them all eaten.
I think that's a little extreme.
Okay. At least have one of them eaten.
How about make a race that does, if you don't have a race that cannibalizes other races, how about you make one? That's mine.
You gotta have some cannibalism to make your world a little more fun.
Yeah. I mean, it's nothing like cannibalism to spice things up. Better yet, how about, like our lizard people, they're pretty basic, right? I mean, we're just talking about right now they are, but in my head, the concept of them, they're locusts. They travel across the land and the sea, and they eat everything they can until their resources are spent, and then they have to keep moving. So that's a pretty basic thing, as opposed to
they're very Stone Age, and maybe even barely Stone Age, because they like to bite, right?
Right. So why not switch that up and make like a bunch of Hannibal Lecters? Why not make cannibals that just look at other sentience as, morsels, and, like they super spice and cook them?
Well, it gets to the question too of when does it count, right? So if you involve, like, let's say a super advanced alien race who is so far advanced we appear like ants to them, are they cannibals for eating us?
Well, I mean, then we get into the whole debate that is sentience a sliding scale?
Yeah.
Is it like what you have to be so sentient to not to be considered cattle?
Yes. Where is it right? Where is it wrong? I don't know the answer to that, but I still eat meat. So what does that make me? Maybe a cannibal. I was
going to say, makes you insensitive. Now, I say that, but I have steak in my fridge right now. Now, I haven't had steak in my fridge in probably a year, but I do today. This is what I think we've decided is that in my birthday month, I can have steak without my wife giving me a hard time about it.
Very good.
basically I get one steak a year. Like I pretty much go out for steak on my birthday. But last night I decided to go do hibachi and I got steak hibachi. And Sarah was like, "Oh, is it going to be steak month?" And I thought, I didn't consider that, but yes, now it is.
What a wonderful idea.
What a great idea you have there. So go out there, make your cannibals. Real world task.
Real world task is go watch Cannibal the musical.
What a great idea. Yeah. Oh my gosh. If you guys have not found the joy that is this, it's a Trey Parker, Matt Stone, wonderful, terrible, little low budget musical about real cannibalism that happened in the United States in the frontier era of the country's growth. They make real light of it, obviously, because it's them, and it's really funny that they made a musical about it. But it's worth watching. It really is.
Yeah, it's a very good musical. So you kind of see where the idea of South Park the musical came from. Just tremendous. Okay. See you next week.
Thank you so much for listening to the World Builders Anvil.
We would love it if you would share the World Builders Anvil with 2 of your friends.
And so would they.
If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting.
Take them to Stitcher or iTunes, or best of all, just send them to our website, www.garduel.com.
That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.